Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Maddi. Cheers, and welcome to Radical Democracy. Our phone number here at Strong Island Radio is 516-945-9099. So if you'd like to call in, that's wonderful. We are also live on the TuneIn app. And today's topic is enlightened economics, raising consciousness versus raising taxes. So a long time ago, Albert Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So what level of consciousness are we working at now within our government? Gee, there's an interesting question, isn't it? And the level of consciousness, if you look at Power versus Force, a book by Dr. David Hawkins, which I believe I mentioned last week, where he actually looks at levels of consciousness, which most of you will probably recognize from as emotions. Our lower levels are shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, and pride. Our higher levels are courage, fairness, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and ultimately enlightenment. So when you're thinking enlightenment, think of people like Jesus and Buddha and Gandhi, and as we often talk about here, the peacemaker. So I want to explore this looking at what happened with the Amazon deal in New York City. I'd also like to hopefully get on to exploring it in terms of healthcare and immigration. I'm not sure I'll get to all of that in this show because I'm going to start with what I am calling the great Amazon debacle of 2019, or how ego, elitism, and the soundbite generation tanked a $27.5 billion deal for New York City. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background here on this story in case it's not covered in an area where you are. We, of course, are hearing all about it here in New York City and the surrounding areas because it's very big news up here. So Amazon was supposed to build a facility here that would have 25,000 jobs brought to Queens, which is a borough of New York City. These 25,000 jobs would have an average annual income of $150,000 a year. And of course, that would represent an enormous amount of revenue for the state of New York. Like I said, ultimately, over 10 years, about $27.5 billion in tax revenue. And also, it would represent probably another 15,000 jobs. Ancillary jobs is what they're called. So people open restaurants and yoga studios. They send their kids for music lessons. And what's very interesting, too, about that particular income level is that's a high income level. It's an educated income level, and they normally support the arts. So there's a lot of arts here on Long Island where we live and, of course, in New York City. So the benefits to New York City seemed very obvious to everybody, not to mention the fact that New York won this proposal over 237 other cities. So it was a competition that Amazon held to figure out where they were going to put what they were calling HQ2, their second headquarters, right? And New York City wins. Yay. Except for that, later on, as the deal is going through and everybody thinks it's set, there comes up this problem of, well, New York City is giving $3 billion in tax breaks. And that's where the soundbite comes in, right? $3 billion in tax breaks. Well, that's not fair, except for the fact that it turns out, and believe me, I had to do a lot of research to get the full story, so I'm going to sum it up as quick as I can. But turns out that was not the deal. The deal was $1.75 billion based on production, which means as long as they delivered their 25,000 high-paying jobs, then, yes, they would get a $1.75 billion tax break. So initially, the information going out obviously is wrong. I have no idea where the $3 billion number came from, but what happened is the progressive wing of the Democratic Party ran with that, and they created a situation where people were running downtown, protesting in front of the Amazon building, and then also at the 11th hour, the Teamsters Union jumps in, not a union with a terribly illustrious history, but they jump in at the last minute and say, hey, you've got this delivery facility out here on Staten Island. We want to talk to them about unionizing. Let's throw that into the deal. So now we've got all this angry rhetoric. We are calling Jeff Bezos and we're calling Amazon greedy. This is corporate greed at its worst, and everybody's running with this $3 billion number that came out of nowhere. Who the heck knows? And if you do know and you would like to call in and tell me where it came from, the phone number one more time is 516-945-9099. I got my information from the Forbes article about the deal that was written before the deal tanked, and when everybody thought there was, even with the protests, there was just no shot that this deal was going to not go through. The governor was behind it. The mayor was behind it. Of course, everybody was behind it, it seemed like. But what happened is, and Amazon's reason for ultimately leaving was that they had created the Senate, the state Senate, and the people themselves had created a hostile environment. And it turns out that part of this is this weird way that decisions are made in the state Senate on this kind of thing, where it boils down to one guy who basically got to make this decision. And all of this gets tanked, and now people are running around high-fiving themselves, going, yay, we've struck a blow against corporate greed. Really? Struck a blow against corporate greed, or struck a blow against the people of New York City? And now, where originally Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio were blaming the radical left wing of the Democratic Party, now just this morning they've come out, and of course they're on that bandwagon too. Amazon's corporate greed, they're just proving everybody right. Except that is the way of the world. I mean, I'm not really going to debate here corporate greed and imbalance and all of that. I absolutely believe that it is ridiculous that several, 26 billionaires control half the wealth, more wealth in the world than the bottom half. So I definitely do believe that something needs to be done about that. But in this particular deal, what went on is a bunch of ego-minded leaders deciding that they, A, wanted their piece of the pie in the case of the unions, or B, that they were not going to put their people before themselves. Because had this negotiation gone in a higher consciousness way, looking at the great law of peace, where you have to decide before you make a decision, the goal is peace, the goal is harmony, the goal is putting your people before yourself, so you have to make a decision. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be fair? And fair would mean that we don't have this discussion out in public, and we don't allow our friends to take someone hostage if that someone is going to help our people. We have to look at all sides, and also we have to tell the truth. So again, I will say, where in the world did that $3 billion number come from? No idea. So what happened here is basically ego. This was ego and elitism and people thinking they've struck this. Now they're running around congratulating each other, which is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. There were 237 other cities competing for this in Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And as of now, Amazon has announced that they are not going to build a second headquarters. They're going to go with their plans now in Northern Virginia. And I can't remember the other place off the top of my head. There's another place. Nashville, Northern Virginia, Nashville. So that's it. And New York, because it has the highest tax rate in the country, is losing high-income jobs right and left, and will probably lose some of the people that would have worked for Amazon because they will end up moving to Northern Virginia or Nashville, Tennessee. So this is what happens when we have what's called the quick mind thinking. I've mentioned this before on the program. The good mind is when you are making a decision based on what the Haudenosaunee call the three original instructions: gratitude, respect, and love. So if we are grateful for what we have, then we are making a decision based on coming from a place of what we describe in our world, what would be abundance, right? We are not thinking, oh, I'm lacking something. How do I get what I'm lacking? We're coming from an idea that, look, we have all this stuff to be grateful for right now. How can we take it even further? So again, if you are choosing leaders like we talked about last week who have the correct character qualities, they are peaceful, they're kind, they're respectful, they're responsible, they're honest, they are unselfish, they are humble, they are open-minded, they are putting their people before themselves, not whether or not they are going to have more power or more money. When you are choosing leaders like that, then they will make the right decision. And then you don't have to worry about taxation. You don't have to worry about whether or not we are supporting the right people or the wrong people, because you can trust your leaders to make a decision that will always put you first. Compassion. Compassion is the overwhelming theme of working in a higher consciousness. You have to have compassion for others. And you do have to be a little smart. I mean, really, did you really think you were going to change corporate greed overnight? What? What are you talking about? And when we're talking about corporate greed, we please be reminded that the people that set up the corporations hire people, and they were about to hire people that make a lot of money. These are the best and the brightest people. These are the kind of people you want in your town. These are the kind of people that raise up everything around them, that support, like I said, their schools, the arts, all kinds of things happen when you have well-educated people who are in your community. And they are well-educated people. There's no reason why you wouldn't want that, and obviously 237 other cities actually did want that. So, again, going back, do you want to be right or do you want to be fair? I'm going to read it this time. I would like to read a quote from Power versus Force from the book I mentioned by Dr. David Hawkins. He is an MD and a PhD. And this is very important to why we're talking about having to make decisions based from coming from our best selves, not our weakest selves, not our lower selves. This is what he says. Societal choices, more often than not, are the result of expediency, statistical fallacy, sentiment, politics, or media pressure, or personal prejudice and vested interest. Crucial decisions affecting the lives of everyone on the planet are made under conditions that virtually guarantee failure, because societies lack the necessary reality base for formulation of effective problem resolutions. They fall back over and over on a resort to force in its various expressions, such as war, law, taxation, rules, and regulations, which is extremely costly, instead of employing power or enlightenment, which is very economical. So, when we are looking at how to deal best with people, do we need some regulations? Of course we do. And especially in this transitional period, of course we need some regulating. Of course we need some law. But how much? How much? How much do you want to put your faith in a gigantic government that is peopled with people who want power? And that's where we, the people, are making our mistake. We are electing the wrong people. We are putting into power the very people we should not be putting into power, because they want power over us. They want to be able to tell us what to do for their own egotistical and personal reasons. And those are not the people you want in power, especially not in power over you. So this is where, again, the instructions from the Great Law of Peace are extremely important. So now I do want to address that this concept that's been running around in the Progressive Party, which is amazing, but I'm going to address it because it's this idea that in handing out free money, we are being just, we are being fair. That is not fairness. That is not fairness. All right. So if you are going to take money from people who are working through taxes and give it to people who are unwilling to work, this is what has been said. There's a huge difference between unable to work and unwilling to work, because unable to work, that breaks our hearts. We all, of course, want to support those people. That is our highest power. We do care about them. We do want them to be happy and included and with us and taken care of. So, of course, people who are unable for whatever reason to work, of course, we are going to support them. Unwilling, not so much. I'm pretty sure that is not a great idea. So I'm going to share with you a story from a Peruvian shaman that we are very close to, who is talking about how his tribe handled laziness. And among all Native peoples, laziness is considered a form of disrespect. So when I'm talking about what people get in trouble for, they get in trouble for disrespect, especially children. You disrespect your elders, you disrespect somebody else, then you're in trouble. There's no violence. They don't hit their kids. They don't yell at their kids. We've talked about this before for those of you who are regular listeners, but there are consequences for being disrespectful. So Oscar told us once when we were sitting in a teaching session with him that in the old days of his tribe in Peru, they have this saying when they ask somebody who's about to go out and do something, does it produce corn and potatoes? Which is basically just a way of saying, are you going to help the community? Whatever you're going to go out there, whatever you're going to seek to do, is it going to help the community? Otherwise, is it really worth your effort? So, of course, in the light of that value system, anybody who's lazy and who's not going to work towards helping the community is not valuable to the community. So in the old days of his tribe, if somebody was lazy and not producing and not putting out there, they would get one warning. The Haudenosaunee give you 3, but for this particular tribe, they give you one warning. You're not contributing. If you don't contribute, you're going to produce corn and potatoes some way. There will be a way that you'll be producing for the community. And I'm sure we can all imagine what that way would be. It would be fertilizer. So this idea that you can just hand money from people who are working and productive to people who are not working and unproductive is not fair. And it creates a lot of problems in our society today, and it will create problems in the future. Because again, do you want to be right or do you want to be fair? So what's the solution? What do we have to do? It all goes back to education. How are we bringing up our children? What are we teaching them? What is that value system? And you have to value the individual. It cannot be the collective above the individual, because if we look back to go forward to the teachings of the Haudenosaunee and Native America, each person has their own gift to give. You are born with that gift to give. And it is part of our job as your teachers and your family to nurture that gift so that you can contribute to the rest of the community. So what that means is that we're going to watch you, and we're not just going to teach you. And by the way, you would be taught by experts. So let's go way back for the example here. So if I'm going to teach a child to carve, then the carvers are going to do that. If I'm going to teach a child to make pottery, it's the people making pottery that are teaching. So instead of having what we have, this nebulous curriculum that we devise, taught by people who have to be trained to teach the curriculum, you would have experts teaching specific skills and teaching people so that they can find where their niche is. Where do they belong in this culture? What is their joy? And that's the other thing. The goal has to be joy. The goal has to be contribution. The goal has to be belonging. I've said this before, I will keep saying this, we have an $11 billion legal antidepressant business in this country. That is not counting the illegal antidepressants we're all using out there. It's not counting the liquor industry. I don't know what the numbers are on that, which is often used as an antidepressant. We are unhappy people. And we are not asking ourselves, why are we so doggone miserable and how do we solve this? And part of the problem is we have a bunch of people in government that just want to boss us all around for their own gain. And we have to open our eyes to this. The fact that you have people that have achieved a position in government, they have become lawyers and are now representatives. And, I've talked to you all about how I do not think lawyers should be allowed in government because it's like having the fox guarding the hen house, and also because they are trained to be adversarial. They are not trained to compromise. They are trained to win. This is not the personality you want in a government that's governing over 300 million people with a lot of different opinions. So what you want to do is have a government that responds to the people. So to a lot of these people running and that are running on this idea of we're going to give everybody free money, and in order to do it, we're going to print it out because apparently it's monopoly. I've no idea what's going on in their heads here, but I'm not going to speak to all that at the moment. But we're going to give all these people free money, not unable, let me go back to unwilling to work. Right? We're going to give them all this money, and it's going to come from people who are working and who are productive, and they're going to feel good about it. No, they're not. They don't feel good about it now. Nobody feels good about that. Because, again, let me go back to Oscar and his story. Did it grow corn and potatoes? No, it did not. So anybody could do anything. If we are raising our children in this technology age, there are a lot of opportunities out there. When we see, I always think about my nephew who ended up in gaming, from the time he was little. He was a year and a half. We used to sit there and play that ping pong game. I can't remember what it's called, but we used to play. He could play that game at a year and a half old. I had no clue what was going on. He was way better than I was at that game. And you can see in anybody, you can see little kids that are talented at dance. You can see in children what they are interested in, what they are talented at, and what brings them joy. And now in psychology, when we find people that are depressed, we tell them, go think back to when you were a kid and figure out what made you happy. Why don't we skip the middle part? Why don't we just start educating our children the way that Jack Ma and Bill Gates and the guy that heads up Google all says we should be doing? Why don't we educate them so that they are finding that talent and that interest, and then they are exploring it? And as Dr. Alberto Conti said on this show, if you want scientists, you have to support curiosity, not kill it. And that's what we're doing. The National Core Curriculum is all about one-size-fits-all education. Let's make everybody think, act, do exactly the same way we are teaching to 20% of humans. Where does that make any sense? Unless it's because the people in power know that if we can make you depressed and make you unhappy and make you distracted, then we can control you. So once again, people in power who are only interested in who? Themselves, not you. And so this is where our responsibility comes in. We, the people, are going to have to change the plan. We are going to have to reject people like this. These people that have gotten to this point, they know darn well you have to work hard to get to be even a candidate for government, not to mention to get a position in government. They know darn well that you have to make connections. You have to go out and meet people. You have to read. You have to know something. You have to be educated. They know this, and yet they're sitting around telling you, nah, we're just going to take care of you. We're going to give you, you don't have to do what I did. You don't really want to be in power. We'll give you some money for free. Just make sure you vote for me. How does that raise the level of all of us? We are talking about human dignity here. Humans were not placed here, in my personal opinion, to just wander around doing nothing. You know, you watch kids. Everybody should go watch kids. Kids do not wander around doing nothing. They wander around, or mostly they run around, and you watch, they're interested in things. They're building, they're doing. Take a child outside, sit them on the grass, and see what they do. They don't lay there and fall asleep. They look at the grass. They're picking the grass. They're looking at the grass. They're digging in the dirt. They're looking at the bugs. They're screaming if they see a spider. They're doing. They are doing, they are discovering. And this is what we need to keep alive in humans. Because the really interesting thing about the union coming in with the stuff with the distribution center on Staten Island, those are the jobs that are going to be gone in 30 years, probably sooner, because those are the jobs that are going to be done by machines, by robots, by drones, by computers. The jobs that are going to remain are the $25,000 jobs that would have come to New York City that require creativity, that require people to do, not machines to do. So down the road, you're going to lose any tax money from that, if that's your interest, is getting a lot of tax money. You're going to lose all that because all those jobs are going to ultimately turn over, as Jack Ma and Bill Gates warn us all. And the jobs that we need are the human being jobs. We need people in the arts. We need people that are creative. We need people to sit there with people. We need people talking to people, being with people. And so once again, please argue with me if you'd like. You can call in at 516-945-9099, and I will go on to talk about what are some other examples of economics. And I'm going to start with what's called the just market. So let's call it the fair market. So the fair market, the just market concept comes actually out of the Old Testament. It is actually the idea that when we create a market or a business, however you want to look at this, we create it with two things in mind. One is that you gain, but I don't lose. So we can create markets and we can have transactions so that somebody gains, but the other person doesn't lose. It's what we tell kids all the time. Walk into any school, create a win-win situation. If you are giving money away to people who don't want to work and contribute, that is not a win-win. That is I lose and they win. So, of course, that's going to create resentment. Then the other thing you look at is helping your neighbor. There is, like Rabbi Hillel, that famous quote, and if I get it wrong, feel free to call in and correct me, who once said, "Love thy neighbor." When somebody asked him, "What's the Bible about?" And he said, "The Bible is about love thy neighbor. Everything else is just commentary." Sometimes it's quoted as, "The Bible is about do unto others as you would have others do unto you." And everything else is commentary. So, but the idea in creating a just marketplace, a fair marketplace, is that nobody loses and everybody gains. Also, this nonsense about printing money to pay for stuff, money was originally supposed to represent, it's called frozen work. In other words, as we get more and more humans on the planet, we're not living in a tribal situation anymore, which means that bartering, and I may or may not get to how to create bartering on a large scale, but as we get more and more people on the earth, which means we also get more and more talent, which means we're creating more and more things that people want and people need, then we have to have a way to get those things from those people, and we can't always just trade it. There's not always goods or services to trade. So we create markets and money is created, but money is supposed to represent work. It represents something. It represents productivity. That's what money is supposed to represent. The second you start having it represent nothing is when the problem happens, because then people get a lot of money and they do it without it representing things or without people seeing the reward and the benefit to them of people who are on Wall Street, people who are doing all of this stuff. We just call it greed, 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 because we have a lot of wealthy people that seem to not be sharing. So that's where the other idea of you are always helping your neighbor, this concept of sharing, comes into play. Is that's how we decide in the way it's described in the Old Testament and the Talmud is that we have to always have an eye to our neighbor. We're not taking from them, they're not taking from us, and if they need help, we are there to help them. Extremely important concept. Now, as my aunt pointed out to me once when she was having a discussion with a bunch of people who were all upset about Wall Street, but also happened to have been former teachers who were living on their income, their benefits, their retirement from being teachers. Those retirement funds are all there because your union invested them with people on Wall Street. Otherwise, there would not be those retirement funds. So you have to think about generating abundance for everybody. And abundance does not mean you're going to get every single thing you want. It does not mean that you're going to get into, the big giant mansion and have 50 cars. And it doesn't mean that. What it means is that it is a way of looking at the world where your concern is for each other, for yourself, that everybody has enough, and mostly that everybody is happy, is joyful, is doing something they love to do, has a family. I'll go back to what a long time ago on an earlier show when I mentioned my brother-in-law who passed away, Miles Kaiser, who was a Marine and who was in Lebanon after the Marine barracks had been blown up. And he loved the Lebanese people. And he said to me, one of the most profound things anybody's ever said to me, as you travel all over the world, people are mostly interested in being happy, in having a nice family, having enough food, having a comfortable, safe place to live with their family and their friends. That is what the vast majority of the world is seeking. It's our leaders that mess it up. But in the case of the United States, where we have so much freedom, so much choice, so much access to so much, it is our responsibility as citizens to look deeply at who we are choosing as leaders and to consider this, to do the research. And I'm telling you, my dad told me a long time ago, question authority. He would never let me, I would go to him, could you give me the answer to this, even in science, which I'm not so great at, except for biology, maybe, but, and definitely not great at math. But he made me find the answer, which would really annoy me when I was a kid, but has really paid off because within that, you question things. You don't go on a soundbite. Somebody doesn't run up and go, who's a progressive leader, obviously with a vested interest in keeping themselves in power and getting their ideology across to you, who comes running up to you and goes, yeah, Amazon's getting a $3 billion tax break. We got to stop this. Pick up a paper, read something. And I'm totally against the news. I mean, I've said this before. Don't watch the news. It's all negative. Doesn't matter whether you're watching left news, right news. There is no middle news. So whatever you're watching, it's always negative. You don't want that. You don't want to look at that. But you can read magazines. I found the statistics of what the original deal was in Forbes magazine. So if you want to know what's going on in the business world, pick up things like Forbes, read the Wall Street Journal. And then if you're going to object to the way something is, have a solution. That's your responsibility. Don't just sit there and complain. Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it this way. Isn't it terrible? They're doing this. No one wants to hear it. We don't want to hear it. We want to hear what your solution is. But if you're not going to do the research that it takes to give a solution, if you're not going to be caring, compassion is not, it's not compartmentalized. You can't say, I'm going to have compassion for these guys over here. I have compassion for them. They're my friends. They vote for me. I'm going to have compassion for those people. You people over there who I personally have decided are greedy and horrible, I have no compassion for you. And you people that are supporting the people that I have decided are greedy and horrible, no compassion for you either. So when we're at this place where we are fighting each other, where we are up against each other like this, we have to step back and say, what's causing this? What's causing it is usually some form of fear. And using forcing people to do something that they don't want to do, like Thomas Jefferson said, it is immoral to force people to pay for something they don't want to pay for. If you're going to force that, you're always going to have resistance. If you're going to say, hey, I want to listen to you. I want to hear what your opinion is. Tell me why this is scaring you. Tell me what you're afraid of. Let me hear it. Let me know what is going on with you, because I'm afraid of the opposite thing. So if we sit down here and we talk to each other, then we can figure out a solution. Everybody's not going to get what they want. That's the other thing. Abundance doesn't mean you get everything you want. It doesn't mean that. And that's the problem with, I should start calling them the alleged progressives, because I don't think they're actually progressive, but that's just me. But I mean, this idea that somehow we're going to have like everybody getting everything that they want, happiness and joy through not working, and punishing. That's the other thing. We're going to punish these people that have created the very technology you are dependent on. We're going to punish them. Do I think they are probably overcompensated? Yeah, I do. I do think that. I do think they owe a little more to the community. But you have to tell the truth. You can't just, it's like what happened with the Amazon deal. You have to tell the truth. They were only going to get that tax break if they delivered on the 25,000 high-paying jobs. So you worked all these people up, you created this hostile environment, and you took the biggest dog on the block and said, bye-bye. And never in your mind did it occur to you that they would maybe say bye-bye to you first. They're the big dog. They can go anywhere in the world. Of course they're going to say goodbye to you. How did you miss that? But you're standing there on your soapbox feeling so good about yourself because you've won the ideological war. You struck that blow you wanted to strike. Yay, you. Great. And what does that mean for the rest of us that live here in the state of New York? It means terrible things. I mean, and the state of New York is losing all these high-paying jobs because we are charging. When you live in the state of New York and you work out how much money you spend between federal, state, local taxes, if you live in the state of New York, you are paying 64% of your income in federal, state, and local taxes. 64%. That is, I looked that up. That is not me. I'm not making that up. You can look it up yourself. When you add everything together, that's what it is. That's me. That's middle income me. That's not, that's not just the rich people. And let me just throw out another statistic I found out while we're talking about punishing rich people and people who have drive. Let's look at them, okay? The top 10% of earners in the United States of America pay 90% of the taxes. 90%. So you could see why they might be a little bit ticked off if you come to them and tell them, you're going to have to pay more. So you have to sit. You have to have patience and compassion. Now, I personally am a person who believes that we have to go back to what tribal people said, and we do have to put the earth first. So there is a difference in the way that, and it goes back to treating children and educating children, the Western model, and here, if you're looking at the indigenous model, many, many indigenous models, not all, but especially here, and I talk about the Great Law of Peace a lot. So the idea for a long time in Western civilization, we'll call it Western culture, is that children are servants. Basically, children are here to serve their parents. Children are not, they have no value until they've grown up to be adults. But while they're here as children, they are owned by their fathers. And in the old days, even the women were owned by their husbands. So you've got that idea that we're going to do whatever we can do right now that serves us, that makes us money, that raises us up. And what the kids, they'll have to take care of it when they get to be grown-ups. As opposed to when you look at the indigenous idea of how we're supposed to be living here on Earth, is that the Earth belongs to everybody, and that when we make decisions about how we're going to treat nature, we are going to have to do that looking at how it will affect the next 7 generations, how it's going to affect children in our world. That would be 175 years from now. So we have to think about, if we're doing this now, how we owe it to them. We are stewards of the earth. That is part of our job as adults, is to see that there is enough left here. So how do we do that? How can we do that? We can't do that by punishing people. We have to point out where people are doing things that are hurting all of us. And that's going to take explaining, not sound bites, actually sitting down, explaining, looking at science, looking at things. And then what happens is we look at things we have to make. We have to manufacture things, right? So in the old days, manufacturing something of quality used to be extremely important, and it was important here in the United States. It was very important that we manufactured things of quality. Then slowly in our culture, it becomes more important to just have things and to have money related to those things. So we lose the quality. So if we took China as an example, so how would we deal with China? So, we have a president that wants to put tariffs on China. We're having tariff wars, trade wars all over this. They're getting money from us that they shouldn't be getting. We're not getting money from them. It's all over that. I'm all for fining China, but not for that reason. I think that if you look at what China's doing in the world, so China is, and I'm just going to take one example. So China's digging out all this iron ore in the Amazon rainforest, which is destroying the Amazon rainforest, which arguably, pretty decent argument, we all need to survive, right? So you've got them digging that out, and they're digging it out primarily so that they can cut down on pollution from all the manufacturing they do. They do all this manufacturing because they make stuff that does not last. It's garbage. And I know this from my plumber, because my plumber told me that in the old days, when he used to go get a washer to fix a sink, it was made in the United States. It was rubber. It lasted like 25 years. I have to have my plumber come in easily every year and a half or every year to replace the washers in my bathroom. Right? And most of us do. Because why? They are not made of quality anything. They are made of plastic, which is a pollutant, which pollutes the air, which pollutes the water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, over in China. And now China's digging up the Amazon rainforest, which we all need in order to survive, which adds to the fact that we have too much carbon dioxide, all that other stuff that's going on. So that's why I think China should be paying more tariffs, and then there's also fairness. You got to get in there. But then we should too. We're doing things here that are not based on looking at what is in the best interest of the future generations. So you kind of get an idea of why they're kind of ticked off at us. So how do we solve that? We have to start producing quality goods that will last a long time like we used to. And we have to say in the rest of the world, you have to produce those quality goods or we're not buying it from you. Because you're not producing quality goods is creating pollution. And the pollution is hurting all of us. And so We need you to produce things that are going to last, not things that are designed to fall apart in 2 years or designed to fall apart in 5 years. Like everything, the whole planned obsolescence, that works great for greed and is not working so great for the rest of us, for the rest of the people. And then once you make decisions that are coming from a more enlightened place, we want to educate our children so that they're happy, so that they're productive, so that they're doing the job in the world that they were meant to do. We want to have goods that do not hurt the earth, that give people jobs doing things they want to do, that don't pollute, that are quality goods. And then we want to recycle. Here's a question for you. We have all these tires all over the place, right? That are terrible for the environment, just laying around, sitting around, doing stuff, doing nothing. So why aren't we taking all these leftover rubber tires and making them into washers? That, according to my plumber, rubber washers last a whole heck of a lot longer than plastic washers. So somebody go out there and do that. I give you that idea for free because I have no idea how to do that. But the idea is that if our consciousness is based on compassion, then we can come up with a whole bunch of ways to be fair to people. And we cannot do what Norway does, which is, I forgot to write down the name of this thing they have, which is where everybody's equal. We can't have anybody excel. We can't have anybody, and Norway is one of the countries we always point to when we're talking about how great social democracy is. Of course, what we never talk about with Norway is that the reason they have all that green energy is because they sell all their North Sea oil to other people. So, of course, they can afford all that green energy, and they also drink a lot. So that's how they get happy. So you can't create a society where people are not allowed to be their best. You want a society where people get to be their best, where they get to bring to you and the rest of us their talents and their ingenuity and their interest and their curiosity, but you have to make it fair, and you cannot do it on the backs of our children. I'm sorry, can't be done. But you can create a new deal that is going to collapse the existing economy. This is where you have to have patience. You have to do it step by step, and you have to prioritize. And you have to sit with people and say, I know you're afraid. I know that if we do this, I know that you think you're going to lose jobs. I know that you think this culture that we've established is going to fall apart. But let's look at this. Let's look at these teachings we have of the just market. Let's look at these teachings we have of bartering. I mean, we can go back as far as tribal cultures and look at bartering. Look at how could we do, if I value on a small scale in a community. So here's Bobby. Bobby's got his studio, right? This wonderful place that he's invested in, and I get to be here and do my thing here. So hopefully this contributes in some way to at least the conversation, which I'm going to give out that number one more time, 516-945-9099. But it contributes to some thought process. Hopefully it is contributing to the community at large. And then we, because we have that exchange, we get to go, we are productive members of society. We look at money as representing work, so we can now go and get food. We exchange that for that, or you could exchange services. That happens all the time. People do small-scale bartering all the time. I do it with some of my friends. I'm sure we all do it. If you care about your neighbor, if you're interested in helping your neighbor, if you have that mentality, then of course you're going to do some kind of bartering with people. You're going to explore ways to have a fair, a just society and a just economy where everybody is raised up, everybody is helped through it. In Buddhism, they call it right consumption and right livelihood. So if you are looking at right consumption, that we're talking about not greed, not more than you need. I mean, that's the idea is is that we get what we need, and from there we go forward into creating things. You don't want a society where we just have a subsistence living. Everybody's got food, shelter, clothing, the end. You don't just want that, because you want a society that values whatever each individual can bring to the table. So from the book Buddhist Economics by P.A. Payutto, which won a big award, but the UNESCO award, what he says is, right consumption is the use of goods and services to satisfy the desire for true well-being. It is consumption with a goal and a purpose. Wrong consumption arises from a term called tana, which means it's the use of goods and services to satisfy the desire for pleasing sensations or ego gratification. Ta-da, that's pretty simple. So that's how we can base what are we creating, what are we consuming, how do we have an eye towards our children and their children, et cetera, all of those things. And you can't do it through just taxing as punishment. That just ticks people off, and it sets us up against each other. I always like that Winston Churchill quote. I have to find that. Oh, for a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket trying to lift himself up by the handle. It's ridiculous. And you end up with two sides. We're always fighting each other. And that's great for the people that want to stay in power, which is why they feed that. Of course they feed that. But we, the people, are going to just have to get smarter. We're going to have to take responsibility. Power is taking responsibility for yourself. When we're talking about the healthcare debate and whether or not how much it's going to cost to provide healthcare, part and parcel of the healthcare debate should be your personal responsibility for your health. I just saw this big lecture on how people that eat less live longer. And they did this experiment with rats, and rats that eat less live longer. They live the human equivalent of 120 to 130 years. So think about the ramifications of just that decision. I'm only going to eat what I need. Okay, so now if you're overweight, you're automatically going to lose weight, which is automatically going to make you healthier, which is automatically going to mean that the rest of us are not going to pay for your ultimate heart disease or diabetes. So that's more fair. Plus, it's also going to mean that you are consuming less. Now we have the idea of right consumption. You are consuming your allotted amount, what's fair for you to have. So now we're not cutting down trees all over the place. We're not trying to, destroy the Amazon to have beef. And I love beef. I have nothing against beef, believe me. One of my favorites. So I don't think we do away with meat, another crazy thing. But what we do away with is we say, how much do we really need? How much are we throwing out? This country throws out 40% of the food that we buy, we throw in the trash. That's disgusting. We have to own that. We have to stop that. That's where, when we take responsibility, when we say we are part of this human community, we are part of this country, we have a responsibility to each other. Do not do unto others what you would not like done unto you. You don't have to be religious to get that. You do have to be ethical to get that, but you don't have to be spiritual. And even though I may be coming from a spiritual place, it doesn't mean you have to. But you have to look at real ethics, not soundbite ethics. And you have to take responsibility. If somebody tells you something on the news and they're a politician and they've got a vested interest in telling you it, look it up. It's easy. Google. Was Amazon really going to get a $3 billion tax break? How long did that take? It took nothing. It did take a while to read all the articles and find all the articles about what really the deal was all about and why Amazon actually walked out on the deal. That took some time to find, but not that much time, And also, if you're not relying on the broadcast news to tell you stuff, because they're not going to tell you the right stuff because they have their vested interest in gaining their audience, if you're going to rely on going to written sources, then you can compare. And then you get to look at, oh, this article over here from the Guardian in Great Britain. This is what they're saying, and these guys over here, they're saying this, and these guys over. Compare. And that makes you more informed. It makes you a better, productive member of society instead of sitting in front of a television and yelling. That's not helping you, and it's making you sick, because also this lecture I saw was all about how all these negative emotions, the anger and the worry and the stress, all of that contributes to your being unhealthy, which, let's go back to healthcare, now is going to fall on the rest of us who are healthy. So what we should be thinking about, in my personal opinion, is how can we sit together with everybody's voices heard from, everybody's ideas, get our smartest scientists, our most talented nutritionists, our best agriculturalists, not Monsanto, but our best agriculturalists, get them, not the people making money off of big agri and big pharma, but let's get those people, the smartest people, not the people that have the vested interest, the people that have the heartfelt and the mind-centered interest. That's what we need. That's who we should be talking to. And if we're making our decisions and talking with them, they're listening to us and they're explaining to us. And believe me, people who are concerned about us, who have great knowledge on a particular topic, want to make it simple enough for the rest of us to understand it. We just have to start asking the right questions. It is not right that we have a country where half the people are on drugs, on legal drugs, where we're supporting a pharmaceutical companies that are lying to you. That's where the Wall Street problem is because we're investing in companies that are disreputable. They are lying to you about what's going on with the drugs. We know doggone well that the best way to deal with depression is to get people out exercising, find them a social group, to get them. There was a guy from Harvard who made this whole study on it, discovered this whole thing, and how antidepressant pills only deal with people who have organic depression. The vast majority of us don't have that. We have things that can be solved by socialization and by better eating and by more exercise. That is what is going to deal with most of this $11 billion addiction that we have. Is you got to make people happy. You have to, it's like my dad always said to me a long time ago, everybody wants to feel important. Everybody can feel important. Everybody is important. If we feel good about ourselves, we are naturally going to have something good to contribute to the rest of the world. But you can't have an education system that is designed to benefit real estate developers and the people that want to stay in power, because they are making your mind numb. They are going against what the science of brain research teaches us, of psychiatry, of psychology, of human behavior. They are going against all of that science, and they have to have a reason why they're doing it, at the same time as they are hypocritically telling us that we want to train our children to be scientists so that they can get good jobs in the future. So, does that make any sense to you? It makes no sense to me. So I'm just pointing out these things that make no sense to me. And then, like I say, you can always call me up and disagree with me. I'm very good with accepting the idea that I could possibly be wrong about all this stuff. But I do think it's worth thinking about. And will it happen overnight? Absolutely not. When I put this stuff out there and I say this stuff to you, I in no way think that this is going to happen even in my lifetime. But I do think it's worth the endeavor. I do think it's worth looking at how do we create a world that is fair and just to everybody? How do we do that? And I didn't get to deal with the immigration issue, but to a degree, when we look at why people are leaving the countries that they're leaving to come here, and of course, my husband and I do a lot of work with people from those countries in our spiritual work that we do. A lot of the problems that are down in those areas were caused by American companies. They were caused in the 50s. with United Fruit, and which becomes Chiquita Banana, which, a lot of these issues supporting bad governments leads to, and the companies that are there now. Our friends from Ecuador would love to go back to Ecuador. Their whole family's back in Ecuador. But what costs them $20 in groceries here costs them $100 down there. And they're producing the fruit that we're all buying. So again, it is a matter of educating yourself, taking responsibility. What is our responsibility based on, but we can't dwell in the past. I'm not big on dwelling in the past. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is looking at what do we do now? What can we do now that is fair, that is just, that raises everybody? That raises everybody up. And if we still have companies going into these areas of the world, exploiting them for coffee and fruit, selling it all over the world, and then charging the people that live there a ridiculous amount of money and paying them very little to do the job for the rest of us, then we do have a responsibility. If I'm going to go buy a bag of grapes from El Salvador, I don't want to have to feel guilty about it, because guilt is way down there on the lower consciousness level, way lower consciousness. So these are just a few things to think about, and I will be signing off now. Thank you all so much for listening, and I wish you peace and love and compassion and fun. Go out there, have fun. Bye. Thank you.